Hey guys, welcome back to another online class with me, Nail Dad. And let's go through some of the questions we had from our last video of application, okay? Hey everyone, welcome back to another free online class. And this class is sponsored by NDS BD Pro, using all NDS BD Pro products. So from our last online class when I did the application 2 beading, we had a lot of questions about what's a good size for a beginner and what's a good size for advanced nail techs. So with me, when it comes to acrylic brushes, I always think a size 12, 14, 16 is ideal for any nail tech, beginner or advanced. But in a sense, if you're a beginner, a size 12 would be more practical. I know a lot of my students sometimes come to classes and they can't come with a size 8 or a size 10, and it's way too small. Size 10 manageable, but a size 8 is, I think, is way too small to learn the techniques of picking up beads and also working efficiently. And also, please be mindful of acrylic brushes also. 100% Klinsky acrylic brushes and synthetic brushes are two different type of brushes. If you're buying an acrylic brush on Amazon or wherever you're buying it from, that's like $8 to $10, you're gonna more likely is gonna be synthetic. Now, what's a synthetic brush? A synthetic brush is pretty much a nylon plastic hairs compared to NDS BD Pro 100% Klinsky brushes, where it's going to be Klinsky hair. Now, the difference between that is the nylon plastic brush is not going to be able to absorb monomer and also maintain the acrylic without getting it built up and glunked up. And a lot of people can use that in the beginning and they beat it up and it's easy disposable. But acrylic brushes are pretty much a bread and butter for the nail techs. So you need to have a good quality brush once you start working. And also it's going to allow you to be able to do application very smooth. Now here I have my NDS BD Pro brush size 12, 14, and 16. And these are already crimped. If you buy off from NDS BD Pro, all you have to do is clean it and train it. It gives it the oval look. We're going to go over liquid to powder ratio, which is probably one of the most important thing when it comes to doing it with acrylics. And as you can see, the brush sizes are different. So the liquid to powder ratio is going to be different per brush size because the amount of monomer absorbed in a 12 brush is definitely going to be different from the amount of monomer absorbed on a 16 brush. And when you make contact with the monomer, it's going to absorb right away up to the brush. Now, understanding this ratio will allow you to be able to pick up a good bead, but also understand why is your bead runny, why is it dry. So when you're using a size 12 brush, of course, you're going to be picking up less monomer. It's more manageable. That's why it's more beginner friendly compared to if you're using a 16. It's automatically going to pick up almost double the amount of monomer that your 12 brush is going to pick up. So now your ratio to the powder is going to be higher. So as a beginner, you're not going to be able to control that as well as you will a size 12 brush. And eventually over time, as you get the technique down, understand liquid to powder ratio, you can always upgrade your brush size to pick up larger beads, but you'll be able to have a firm understanding to make sure your ratios are proper relative to the size you're using. So I'm using NDS BD Pro number 1 cashmere for this example to pick up beads. I'm going to start out with my size 12 and I'm going to move to the 14 and 16 to show you the difference. So the brush itself is going to be semi-dry. Once you make contact with the monomer, it's going to absorb monomer. And you don't have to slam and jam your brush in there. The moment you make contact, if it's a Klinsky brush, it's going to just absorb. Then you have to be able to know how much monomer am I removing relative to the bead size I want and how much powder should I pick up. So I make get the monomer in there. And then I'm going to use the rim of my dampen dish to kind of remove the monomer for my ratio. I always remove it from the base to the tip of the brush because that allows it to push it evenly. And you can always practice this with me while you're watching this video. Now in this video, I'm going to demonstrate picking up beads with a brush without releasing any monomer, picking up a bead where I'm going to be pulling against the rim halfway. And then I'm going to pick up a bead where I'm going to pull all the way to the tip to show you guys the difference in bead sizes. And also I'm going to use all NDS BD Pro size brushes from 12, 14, and 16. Now in this video, I'm going to demonstrate picking up 3 type of beads, a really wet bead and also a 50-50 ratio, and also one that's really dry. As you can see, I put my brush in, I don't remove any monomer. I'm going to go into my acrylic about 3 seconds and I'm going to pick up my bead. Now anytime you pick up an acrylic bead, the first thing it's going to do is going to look nice and firm. Powder polymerization happens within the first 3 seconds when the monomer starts to react or work at its best. So sometimes you got to be careful when you're picking up a bead. It may look firm, but once you put on the client's nails, it's going to start to run because it's going to start to polymerize. It takes about 3 to 5 seconds depending on your monomer and your powder, but it's something that you really have to notice It's better to hold the bead onto the brush and wait for it to dry a little bit, put it onto the nail, rather than have it run all over the client's nails and you're flooding the cuticles. So this is part of liquid to powder ratio. Now I'm going to move about half, and I'm going to pick up the same size bead, and as you can see, it's a lot more firm. Now I'm going to give it 3 seconds. It's going to gloss over a little bit longer because it's going to be less monomer. I picked up the same amount of powder, so you see it's not as runny. So for me, this bead is more stable, and it allows me to go right to the client's nails, and I'll be able to control it better than when I did my last bead. Now I'm going to pick up a bead where I'm going to just pull from the base to the tip of the brush. As you can see, the bead is going to be a little bit smaller, and you can see the powder condensating by the mid of the brush there. That means that there's not enough monomer there, so it takes a little more time for the powder to finally set in. But you can tell that the bead is a lot smaller, and it glosses over a little later. Now this bead is going to be more firm, and doesn't mean it's bad. It's very situational. There may be situations where you will need a bead like that, probably by the cuticle area, or you have to fill it in a certain spot, and you don't want it to flood or run. So now we're going to switch to the 14 brush. Our 14 is 2 sizes up from our 12, so of course we're going to do a full wet brush, and we're going to do the same pickup, and of course it's going to be a larger bead because we have a larger brush. As you can tell, the bead is going to start to run after it polymerizes. Now, if you run into this situation and you don't want to waste your acrylic, you can always hold onto your brush and let it dry until it sets to kind of the right consistency that you want before you put in the client's nails, or else you're going to put it on there and it's going to run all over the place. It's going to be a lot more hassle and work. I'm going to do a 50% ratio, and I want you to notice the bead difference. Okay, now 50%, the bead is still going to marble, as in the monomer is going to activate, but it's going to be less runny. So this for me is more stable. I'm allowed to wait for 3 seconds and apply the bead onto the client's nails and be able to work with it without it running all over the place. Repeating the same process I did with the 12, we're going to pick up a dry bead. Now this dry bead is going to take longer to marble because there's less monomer there, as you can tell. You gotta make sure that you're gonna pick up the bead the same way each time to kind of understand the ratio. So when I go into my acrylic, I always go in the same angle, and I always pick up the same amount, as in leaving my brush with the same pressure every time. That will allow me to understand the difference. With my 16 brush, we're gonna notice it's gonna be a big difference because the 16 brush is a lot more larger. It means it's gonna be wider and longer. And now we have a beautiful round bead. Of course, it's going to be runny, as you can tell. But like I always say, when I run this situation, when I'm doing a client, I just hold the bead onto my nail. So I would only ever pick up a bead like this if I need to do like a 1 bead. Generally, I do nails, I do 2 beads. So I don't really need a large bead. A lot of people want to use a size 20, 22. I personally think it's way too large, so I just stick to a 16, and once it's crimped, I'm able to adjust my ratio for the bead size I need. And I generally do 2 beads anyway, so it's not necessary for me personally. So this is a medium bead. You can tell it's more stable. Beautiful pearl from our crimped brushes here. And as I'm picking up these beads, you can know I'm cleaning my brush in between before I go in the monomer, because you do not want to deposit acrylic residue into the monomer. It's going to contaminate it. So a dry bead with the 16 brush, same thing. Anytime you get a dry bead, you're going to notice the powder by the midsection there is still powdery even after you pick up the bead. But monomer will start to kick in and it'll start to polymerize. So now that we've gone through everything there, we're going to just clean our brushes, reshape it. These NDS Beauty Pro Clean Skin brushes are very good. You can tell not a lot of residue as long as you're cleaning in between. I'm just doing a final clean and final shaping, make sure the brush is going to stay really well. And let's get into some application. So as I said before, I would never have to pick up a big bead unless I need to do like a 1 bead. So after I'm done cleaning these brushes, I'm going to take out my mannequin hand and I'm going to do a 1 bead. And as you can notice, the bead sizes, although they're all different, they're all round pearls. That's because the way I pick up the acrylic and also the way my brush is. So let's take out this about 2XL length square tip. So for this 1 bead exercise, I'm going to use my size 16 brush, which is the largest brush I have. And I'm going to get as much monomer as possible, but also making sure that I do pick up enough powder to be able to give myself a nice medium bead. And I want a runny bead. I want to be able to work with the powder as it dries. So once I place the bead on, I'm going to stretch it out as much as I can, and then I'm going to centralize the powder, make sure it's not going to run over to the sidewall. And I notice that the powder is not flowing back to the sidewall. That means it's starting to dry. this is a good indicator for me to start working with the powder. So when I brush powder in, I always brush more parallel to the nail and not at an angle, because if you're going to go in an angle, you're going to dig into the powder, especially with a powder that's semi-dry. You're going to leave little indents here and there, and it's going to cause more work for you later on. I like to brush the powder in nice and smooth, so it allows me to have less work later when I have to either shape or file or drill. It's just more efficient for me. I hope you guys enjoy this free online course. We went through liquid to powder ratio, also applying the acrylic after understanding the liquid powder ratio. You can always subscribe and leave me a comment in the comment section what you want to see next. And you always purchase any NDS Beauty Pro products at ndsbeautypro.com and use my promo code NowDad to save yourself 10%. Thank you guys. See you in the next video.